But it does tend to mean that I was the only one in the family who had the opportunities.
Your brother and sisters didn't?
No, that's right, yeah.
Today we have David Pinsker, the co-author of Stories from the Genba. I am so excited to speak with him. I met him the other day at an event that we had close by, actually close by the American Club. It's close by the Tokyo Tower. And he was very kind to come to me. And I already had his partner on, the other person that co-authored this, Frank Foley, did the book, and he told me about David, and I was wondering if I was ever going to get a chance to meet him, and I met him at the event, and here we have David. David, I want to thank you so much for being here this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'm very flattered. Thank you very much.
Yes. So tell me, let's start. I always start off with, I know where you were born, but I'd like for you to tell me exactly where were you born.
I was born in a place called Mount Hope. It was a Salvation Army maternity facility in Bristol, in England, southwest of England. On that site now, I think there's a bakery. It was a nice old building. I remember seeing it for many years after I was born. Anyway, that was where I saw the light, as it were.
Okay. We were talking earlier about conception and how lucky all of us are that are on this planet to get here. It took, you have 1 in a 200 million. I'd like to say 300 million for the chance of becoming human.
Well, that was where that happened. That wasn't where I was conceived.
That's not where you were conceived, yes.
But,
do you have siblings?
Yes, I am the youngest of 4. I've got 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay, is the sister the oldest?
No.
Okay.
No, she's the second born. So there's a lot of disadvantage to being the youngest, I believe.
How many years between you and the oldest?
7.
Okay, so so then you guys grew up to be pretty close.
I think so, and I think looking at us now, I'm pleased to say that we are really quite a close family, and surprisingly in some respects, given what family goes through, of course. But
tell me about it.
No, it does please me to know that we are close, and I speak to my sister, my brothers, quite frequently, more frequently than my wife speaks to her sister, who only lives 20 miles up the road. So, yeah, we are close, and it gives me pleasure to know that.
What about mom and dad? Are they still here with us?
Oh, they're long gone.
Oh, they were? Oh, really? Okay.
I was orphaned at the tender age of 45.
Okay, come on. They lived a good life. How old were your parents when they left? Did mom go before dad?
No, my dad went first. He was 73, I think.
Okay, that's kind of young.
And my mother went about when she was 83, actually.
Okay. So they stayed together the whole time?
Miraculously enough, they did, yes.
Through the ups and downs of trying to live with someone who you weren't born next to.
All of that, yes. Yeah. Then I went to my local comprehensive school for high school, so at age 11.
Okay.
At that time, most children took an exam called the 11 plus, and if they passed it, they went to a grammar school, and they were on a reasonably good path. And if they didn't, they were basically junked. So they would go to what was called a technical school, and they would be expected to leave school at 14 or 15. The 11 plus was abolished before I reached that stage. So I went to what was called a comprehensive school, which was a very important idea in educational and social policy. The idea was to have children from all backgrounds and all skill types, so that they would benefit from each other. Highly controversial. And
how long did you do that? How long were you in that system?
11, from age 11 to 18.
Okay, but you were the beginning. So it started when you were 11.
Yeah.
The program.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that was when they were just being introduced throughout the UK.
Do they still do that in the UK? It's abolished now.
Things have changed a lot. I'm not really very familiar with it. I doubt very much, and certainly that school doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't exist now.
Right.
But I'm grateful to it, because it did give me chances that I, as a working class child with very little parental guidance, would have had. So I did have opportunities as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But it does tend to mean that I was the only one in the family who had the opportunities.
Your brother and sisters didn't?
No, that's right, yeah.
Because they didn't have the system at the time.
That's right, yes, yes.
So did they go straight to a trade school?
Yes, pretty much. Well, my oldest brother did, and he did really badly. He was just not suited to that kind of study.
Mm-hmm.
My sister left at 15 and went to work in Woolworths, I think a branch of Woolworths, and then had a number of kind of blue-collar jobs. The other brother, we started an apprenticeship in engineering, heating and ventilating engineering. Then he went to Israel at a very young age. He was only 16, with no particular plan. Well, he had a plan. It was certainly something he wanted to do, but it was it was a very powerful decision. So he went there for 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. Goodness. He went to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are your parents Jewish?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that means your mother has to be Jewish. Because
we all stuck with it.
Right. What kind of work did your father do?
Well, he had trained as an upholsterer.
Okay.
So that was his trade, but he didn't get much work doing that. And in my first memories, he had a small furniture shop and second-hand furniture on one of the main roads in Bristol, and he was doing house clearances and selling the stuff there. But he didn't do very well, to be honest, and it was generally we'd see kids walking by, junk shop, look at the junk shop, but he had some interesting things come by, and unfortunately, I'm sure there was quite a lot of valuable artifacts that slipped through his fingers. And but he sold that. It wasn't doing very well at all. They were in difficulties. And so they sold that, and they bought a somewhat larger house and started to take in lodgers, which was not a lifestyle choice I would recommend.
How old were you when that started to happen?
4.
Oh, so you're telling me this stuff, this is in retrospect because you didn't know what was going on at first. I mean, he's doing all this before you.
Yeah.
So as you got older, then you start realizing you were being filled in as to what took place.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Some of my earliest memories, my sister remember, and my oldest brother, they remember a lot of that life in the shop, and to hear them speak about it now, it's quite idyllic. They liked that for a while, and that all just broke up when we moved from there into this house.
Was it far from where you lived before?
Well, not really.
Not far, okay.
At the time, my dad also worked in a chocolate factory, Fry's, a company called Fry's. Got recently that it was Fry's then, taken over by Cadbury's, and about 15 years ago, taken over by the Kraft Group.
Okay.
And that was I remember him working in a night shift. He used to go. Somebody would pick him up on a bike. He'd be on the back there, and I remember waving him goodbye. And it seemed to be about once a week or once a month or so. He'd come in. He'd come back on a Saturday morning with all the chocolate rejects in cardboard boxes, and they were really good. All the stuff that just couldn't go out.
Right.
And that was quite a magic moment.
I think it would be, yes.
But that life kind of left us, really, when we moved to this larger house, and they took in lodgers, and there were a lot of them, to be honest, and it was not really, it was not the ideal environment for children, I would say.
Okay. And that's the way it was until you left?
Pretty much so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad was a bit, because he used to go off internally, inside himself, for days and days on end and hardly speak. And
be there. He would be there.
Well, physically, but
physically,
he would just hardly talk to people.
Where was he born? Where was he from?
He was born in Britain, in Bristol.
Okay.
His parents had been brought over as babes in arms after one of the pogroms. And my mother was born in raised by a Jewish orphanage in London.
Okay.
Odd thing, they never really talked about how they met. You know, I know that they met in a town called Weston-super-Mare. It's a sort of seaside town near Bristol. It's not particularly elegant, but it's accessible. And the story was that my mother went there and somehow they met. But I mean, with a bit of maturity and world knowledge, and realized, well, that really is not feasible for her to have gone quite a distance in 1947 on her own to the other side of the country and just kind of happened to meet this man there. So it must have been an arrangement somehow.
I see.
They never,
but that's right after the war, too.
Yeah.
Right after the war. So I think England was still in shatters. I mean, it was...
So, yes. Yeah.
So that's why you assumed it must have been arranged.
Well, it must have been arranged. No, I think it was arranged because they were Jewish.
Okay, I see.
Because for a young woman of her age, at that point, having been brought up in an orphanage, I mean, the thought of her taking a train, 3 or 4 hours to the other side of the country. I mean, I know it's only London and Bristol, it's only 120 miles, but it would have been quite a distance and quite a journey at that time.
If you didn't have a purpose, if you weren't going to meet someone or something.
Yeah, so it must have been arranged, but they never ever talked about that. So odd, really, isn't it?
That's interesting. So as a child, were you more academic or were you more sports-minded?
I was regarded as more academic, but
out of all your siblings?
Well, yes, I suppose so. I was regarded as brainy, they thought. I mean, I was fairly good at language. I was good at learning English. I was good at with writing things.
What do you think started that? Do you recall, or was it your mother reading to you, your father reading to you?
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember that. No, that's one of the things I'm very grateful to. I had a lisp, when I was quite young, and I remember my mother really patiently sitting me on her lap and curing me of that when I was about 6. That was one of my more precious.
But you remember having the lisp?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But your mother just stayed with you.
She said, "This is how you say it." Yes, and I'm in 1 hour or so. She cured it.
That is beautiful. That's all you need is time. So they changed you. They probably give you a bunch of confidence too after that too.
Well, I mean, when you're 6 years old, I don't know if confidence is a big issue you have, but
that's true. But she used to read to you often, so that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
But did she read to your other siblings?
I'm sure she did. Yes,
she did. Okay. Yeah. So all of you have probably a good grasp on literature and liking to.
Well, I was the only one who really had something of a formal education, really, or
because
anything
of the
beyond
way they did the school.
Yes, anything beyond what was actually rudimentary. My oldest brother dabbled in college a few times. He is well read. So the other two are not particularly. Well, they read. They're interested in things, but they're not particularly oriented towards study, shall we say.
Okay. What kind of interest did you have when you went into literature and stuff? What were the biggest areas you were interested in?
History.
What type of history?
We were brought up on all of this, on English history, which was a list of dates and battles and stuff.
But you enjoyed that?
Well, I did, yes. Yes, but we had to choose a foreign language, and the choice was German, French, or English. And French seemed to be obvious.
Well, how would English be a foreign? That was
Spanish.
Okay, I was about to say, I'm listening.
Well done. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, French seemed to be just a bit obvious and a bit too close, and Spanish seemed a bit remote. Chose German, and I surprisingly was quite good at it. Actually, reasonably okay.
Are you still good with German?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I read it, and I didn't get much chance to use it, but I read it and I watch the news, watch films in it. Okay. Occasionally, I might get a piece of work that needs to be translated, but I don't really use it much these days, of course. But the language is there. And so I suppose that was what determined my educational outcome. So I then went on to do languages at university.
Also, you became a linguist?
I suppose so.
Okay.
I mean, it's not I suppose so, yes, yes.
So how many languages do you speak?
Well, I mean, German, and later I did French,
Okay.
and since I've been here, Japanese
Okay.
to some extent.
And how long have you been in Japan?
I came here in 1979, firstly, and I've been here most of the time. I left on 2 occasions, not expecting to come back. And
so you stayed away for a while?
Yeah, well, yeah, two fairly brief interludes. But I've been here most of all that time. Really.
Okay. Were you married when you left? Were you already married?
When I left Japan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you stayed married. You're still married to the same woman.
Is it the same woman? You know, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean,
because so I talked to so many people here, and I would say it's more than half of the people I speak to have been married more than once here.
I've been married just once. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Same here.
Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, I'm just playing around there, but somebody asked me, "Is it the same woman?" And I wonder, well, is it the same woman when I look at one?
Once you finished school, you had some German under your belt. You knew that you liked languages. Did you have a job while you were in school, or did you get a job right after you got out of school? Or did you go to college?
I went to college, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
to study what?
Modern languages.
Modern languages,
yes,
okay.
Yes. That, by the way, is an option that a young person in that situation wouldn't have today, both those options. The school I went to, the schools now don't, or many of the schools do not offer language choices, foreign language choices, and they don't make it obligatory.
Right.
So there's far less emphasis on language education in Britain now. And where I did my degree, at that time it was Bristol Polytechnic. It's now the University of the West of England.
Okay.
They don't offer languages anymore.
Did you work while you were in college?
Oh, I did part-time jobs and things like that, yes.
What were you doing? Like what?
Well, I did my first year in London, so at a separate polytechnic. I changed from there. So while I was in London, I worked as a waiter.
Okay. Did you have to pay for your schooling, or did you?
No.
You came on a scholarship.
We used to get grants at that time.
They call them grants?
Yeah.
Do you have to pay them back?
No.
Okay, so there's like a scholarship,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, at that time, if you had a place on a qualifying course, which meant a degree level course, your local authority was obligated to pay you a grant.
Okay.
And to pay the tuition. How much they paid would vary, but that has largely gone now. It's all on loans.
Right, that's right. Did you have any obligations at all after you finished school?
No.
So what did you do after that? When you got out of college, what did you do? Did you get a job right away?
I did pretty much straight away. I started working for a local company that made it's not there anymore. It made office furniture.
Okay.
And they took me on as with a rather grandiose title as export sales executive, and I was a bit of a disaster, to be honest.
How long did you do that? How long were you there?
7 months.
7 months. Okay. Were you supposed to be selling into Germany, possibly?
Anywhere really, but largely
Anywhere.
to the Middle East.
Okay.
So they sent me off on a Middle East trip, and I was as green as a suitable metaphor escapes me, but I was not really ready.
Did they send you alone, or did you go with a team?
On
Was it like
that occasion, I had a kind of trial run on a business trip to Ireland.
Okay.
And then I suppose I succeeded with that. So a little later they sent, all right, you've got to go on your Middle East trip now. So they sent me up
alone.
for that. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you to do? Walk us through it.
Visit dealers. Visit dealers. Visit projects. People where there was some building going on. Talk to them about what we might be able to provide. Well, I was ill-trained for it, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, this could be a textbook example of what can go wrong in British management, I think.
Okay.
And I have my own responsibility for it too. I had a pretty bad attitude. So.
Which was what?
Well, I mean, when I was going to work there, I was late, for example. I was usually late in the mornings.
Why?
It didn't seem, because I'd never really had a sense that it mattered to be there on time. I just wasn't really brought up with that, I guess.
Wait, I'm just curious about that. What about when you were in school? Were you late to your classes?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
so that's something that you'd already built into your
Yes,
personality.
yes, yes.
You'd come in when you came in.
Yeah, we had a pretty awful bus service in Bristol, I have to say.
Okay.
I mean, but this is no excuse. But we,
But you used that as your excuse.
to some extent, it is a legitimate reason to be late. And we didn't have a car. My parents didn't have a car. So we relied on the buses, and they were not good. And they were notoriously, everybody knew they were not good. So there was a bit of that. And I suppose there was then the assumption that, well, the bus is going to be late anyway, so what's the point, really? And just a lack of interest, I suppose, and just being a bit slow in the mornings. And
Did they pay you on time when your pay was due?
they would pay on time, yes, yes. So when I started work at this local factory, after a while I bought myself a little car, but it wasn't very reliable.
Okay.
And I would...
Now, the age right now, you're talking 22?
23, yes.
23,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And they would start at 8:15, and I thought, well, that's a bit unreasonable. I thought, well, if I'm going to be here until 5 or 5:30, what does it matter if I'm 10 minutes late? So I had this really pretty bad attitude, to be honest. And I remember there was a security man at the door, usually some retired guy, they used to joke that if he takes off his cap, he has to take off his ears as well, and he would make some sarcastic comment, and I would tell him off because I was management. So I am aware now, and I haven't always been aware of this, but the last few years I've come to realize that my behavior was not optimal, really. And so it was bad from my side. From the company's side, I mean, basically what they did wrong was they took somebody just out of university who was a bit arrogant, I suppose, with what he was taught and what he thought what he was led to believe he was. Gave him a fancy name card that said executive, believed himself to be, a station or two above everybody else. And they just let me get on with it, really. Now, comparing that to what we've come to know about how a Japanese company would work.
But how old was this company? Was it a well-established company?
Yes, it had been there. The basic company, there was a local company that did shop fittings, and then that was taken over by a company which made office furnishings, metal and wooden furnishings as well. And it had been around for well over 100 years or so.
Okay, so they had some experience in hiring people like you.
From
college, or were you one of the first?
They had probably hired a few other college people. They hadn't had many. I was probably...
Okay, so you were like the beginning for them.
Yeah,
they didn't know any more than you knew. So you guys are the blind leading the blind in a way.
I suppose you could say
so they're trying
that,
to see.
But,
what they call it? They called that
sink or swim, they used to say.
That's right.
What it was.
And that's what they were doing to you.
Yeah, and if you sink, then you both sink usually. It was very, very insufficient my degree, my level of training. So I was a young man, and I was going now to this rather dismal-looking company.
How long had you been with them before they sent you out to the Middle East? 4
or 5 months, I think.
It's kind of a good time. Did they ever have a formal classroom? Would someone sat in there?
No, that's the problem. They never did that. So I mean, when I turned up there, I was supposed to be on training. I mean, they just kind of walked me around the floor, the shop, the factory, which was big, and I'd see these people doing these things with machines. I had no clue about what they were doing. They would explain it, but I mean, it was just, it could have been a foreign language,
So you didn't know the wood types. You didn't understand what kind of metals were being used.
Right, yes.
You knew what a hinge was.
That's
you
right.
knew nothing about the construction of the furniture they were making.
Yes, or nothing about how you ship it.
How you ship it, or how it's going to come to them.
Or how it's packed, or nothing about export financing or banking or anything like that. It was just...
What were you doing over there? Okay, I'm just curious. Over the 4 and 5 months while you were there, before they sent you off to the Middle East, to your demise, what were you doing?
Well, a lot of the time I was looking through trade information. So with bulletins from overseas trade missions, we used to get a kind of information service from the chambers of commerce and people like that. So we would hear about tenders, and I would then put together a tender and telex it to somebody.
Inside your company,
Yeah,
maybe?
no, overseas, probably put up the
Oh,
tender.
you just put together a tender, trying to bid on.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I
yes,
got you. Okay.
yes. And send that off, and that was a lot of it.
Right.
I went to one or two exhibitions, I think, or trade shows. Stood there for a while, talked to people. I mean, I was reasonably charming, so I was okay to have around there. But I'm embarrassed now to think of some of the things I said to people because of my sheer ignorance at the time.
And you remember it too, don't you?
I do, yes, yes.
Give me an example that you could share.
We were bidding on furnishing of something for the Dubai Defence Forces, and they contracted the work to a French company. I think they were putting all that stuff together. So basically, I had to talk to the French person, to talk to the Dubai overlord, preparing to go and see him. And I thought, no, what am I going to tell him? You know. And I started thinking to myself, I was drawing up some notes. I thought, and somehow I remember thinking aesthetic value, aesthetic appeal. Bloody hell, you know. He's a military man and all that. And he's got a budget, and I'm supposed to be selling office desks and furnishings. I'm talking about aesthetic appeal, you know. I mean, I just felt naked, you know. I had no tools, no weapons. I had no information.
How did he respond to you?
I'm not sure I actually said that. I
Okay.
must have found something else to say, but I just stopped myself at some point. But I don't think I actually said, "Oh, it's the aesthetic appeal." I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I must have found something else to say. But I do really still remember just feeling completely unprepared for this.
You knew you weren't even close to getting that deal.
We probably got it for some other reason.
Oh, you did get it?
We were already dealing with them through some other.
Okay.
There were something's going through. Unfortunately, that company isn't there anymore. Last time I passed by, the whole ground was given over to a kind of car auction.
But you only stayed there 8 months.
Yes, but it had a very powerful impact on me. I was completely unprepared for that position.
So what happened to you? Where'd you go from there?
I had a couple of sort of part-time jobs, and a bit later I came to Japan.
Also, it was around the same, so
Yeah.
it wasn't too many years before then that you came here.
That's right, yeah.
What brought you to Japan?
Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, I was interested in language. I'd had a notion that I was interested in Japan.
From when?
I think it was the James Bond film that did it, You Only Live Twice.
That's right.
And prior to that, I remember I'd seen a Japanese film at my local picture house when I was about 12. It was Onibaba.
Did you know anyone Asian?
No, I don't think I did. I didn't come to study anything in particular. I mean, I've kind of had an interest, like everybody does, in a bit of martial arts and all of that, but I wasn't really a student of anything like that.
So you came over here with what intention when you first
Well,
came?
to be an English teacher, a language teacher, an Eikaiwa teacher.
Okay. So that was when you first came here. You came here and worked. So what'd you do? You sat there in England and you said, okay, I've about finished what I have to do here. I've had a couple of part-time jobs after that tremendous time I had in Dubai. Now I want to go learn a language that's far away from the languages I've dealt with now recently.
Yes, yeah.
And you saw there were English classes to teach, and you put in for it.
That's right.
And you had your college degree, so they say, of course.
Yeah,
Sure. And you're English too, so you really could get in easily.
Yeah, things worked out pretty well there.
So who'd you work for? Nova?
No, it was a small company called FL Center. They used to have 6 schools.
Based where?
Well, they had one on Miyamasazaka, and that's where my little story begins. My Japan venture begins.
Okay, let's talk about it. So you're right here in Tokyo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came here and...
Yeah, that was October
79.
1979.
Okay.
Yes. And that was a good decision. I felt good, and for a long time I felt this was the right thing to do. I'm glad I did it.
How'd your family feel?
Oh,
Mom and Dad are still here at that time?
My mother was very supportive.
Okay.
Because I'd had a few difficulties, with jobs and things prior to that.
And you're always staying at home?
Yeah, up to that point, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So now you're 25,
23.
Oh, 23.
24 when I
I was
came
going to say,
here.
yeah, 24, yeah.
My dad, I needed a bit of money to come here. My dad didn't want to give it to me, so my mother did. He was never a very interventionist father at all, quite the opposite. But he did say, I think at some point he said, well, you might as well give up or something, or don't bother. So I, in fact, did start to write back to the people in Japan to tell them, sorry, I won't be taking up the position. And my mother saw that, and she said, no, that's not the right
She
thing
wanted
to
the
do.
best for her kids. Yeah. And after, yeah.
So she did. She actually stepped in, and
he didn't know.
He probably didn't know.
No, of course. She didn't want to have any more spirited debates.
Yes, yeah. So that was that.
Okay. And so how long did you stay away the first time?
Well, 18 years, I guess.
Wait, so you went back to visit sometimes?
Oh, I went back to visit, certainly, yeah. But I mean, basically, from that point on, I was living in Japan.
So how did you feel when you first came here?
I'd seen a few documentaries. I remember I'd seen one on, I think it was the BBC a few years before, which was a documentary on a person who had been living here for several years at a time when this was still quite rare. He was a judo person. I remember seeing that and being quite impressed by it. So I like to think I was reasonably knowledgeable. I didn't feel particularly awed by it. I remember seeing all these wires in the sky, where the cables and everything. That was one of my first
impressions
images.
About the place.
Yes, with all of these electricity cables that are exposed and everything.
When did you feel like, okay, I really like Japan, this is going to be my place, from the beginning, or did you couldn't be from the beginning?
I think at the beginning I was okay with it for a while, and I think after about 2 years I had a bit of a crisis, really, and I began to think that it was, well, I don't know if it was a crisis, but after about 2 years I kind of thought, well, it's okay, but maybe it's time to go. And it was around about that time when I began to see beyond Tokyo, and particularly around some of the suburbs, which were not very appealing. I used to feel a bit desolate in places like that. There was a time then, I do remember now thinking around about midway through 82 that, well, it's been 2.5 years, maybe I can just draw a line under this now. It's, I've done it. But that didn't happen for some reason.
Why? When did you get married? When did you get married?
I got married in 83. God, 40
so
years.
That's the reason why. I mean, let's talk about it.
Turned up around about that time. Yes. Yeah.
You're just getting ready to turn the corner. And you say,
Yeah.
Okay. And then did you get married right? You got married almost right away. You didn't know her very long, did you?
Oh,
was she your girlfriend during that time?
No, I was after a while I was working at the Tokyo YMCA.
The one in Yokohama?
No.
Oh, the one.
Here.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, the one. Yes,
yeah.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, they used to have this nice.
They sure did.
I
never went to it, but I know about it.
Yes.
Because they had this one, and then the sister one, I guess, in Yokohama. They had the one in Yokohama too.
Yes.
Yes.
And they used to run an evening school.
Okay.
And so that was what I was teaching on. And
through the company that you were working with?
No, this is after I left them.
Okay, you left them.
This is my second job. YMCA was a good place to work at the time. Actually, it was stable.
That's right.
You had good contacts. You got paid.
That's right.
And they used to take care of your health insurance and things like that.
That's right.
For the first time, I was a real mensch. I was teaching Saturdays and evening classes, and there was a woman there, and she came with a friend. They were a bit older than the others, but they were very enthusiastic. They were not terribly gifted, not terribly capable, but they were really keen and enthusiastic. So it was a pleasure.
Oh, okay. Does your wife speak English now?
No,
Okay.
I don't get much English out of her now, actually, to be honest.
And when I met you, I asked you if you had children, and you said no, and I almost suspected that because I said you don't have any stress marks from kids. You don't have any kid stress marks.
No, children. That's one mistake I didn't make.
So, do you have any other hobbies or anything that you like doing outside of? And what do you do now? Because I noticed from your other card, I saw. Let's see, I have your cards here, and you had branch manager, of the Royal Navy Association. What's that about?
Oh, that's a kind of hobby job, voluntary work.
Okay. What about the senior consultant
That is a
for
real job.
LHH?
Yes, that is a real job.
Are you still doing that?
Yes, I do.
And what is LHH?
That is Lee Hecht Harrison. It's an American company.
Oh, okay.
HR and placement. So Lee Hecht Harrison does, or LHH as it is now, because everything has to be
shortened to initials, right?
It's part of the Adico group.
Okay.
It's a very big company, actually.
So where are you today? We were talking about your businesses now, LHH.
Yes. Well, that work is that is the major part of what I do now, and that is assisting people with their resumes and their career transformation, really, their interview preparation and that kind of thing.
Okay.
I also do some other work in an area of communication. For example, with an interior design school, I work on a program for them.
Well, Frank told me he called you up because he said he had the idea, and he did say he got the idea from me.
Did he?
He did. He said after I interviewed him and had him the first time, he said, I can do that better. And he did do it better. Anyway, so he put it together in a book. He said, but he needs someone that knew how to write really well. And he said, it's a good friend called David.
Well, that was nice of him to say that.
And that's why you're on here, co-authoring this book. It's wonderful. So you've seen me do this once before, talk about the book, Stories from the Genba. And we're going to end here. What I usually do, David, is I ask a question at the end of my podcast of my guests.
Is that like the desert island discs?
Yes.
I see.
If you could go back in time and meet the younger David, what advice would you give him, and how old would he be?
I would tell him to be a bit more assertive when he needed it.
What age was he? What age would you be at that time?
22, 23, and well, this was a kind of recurring characteristic, but also at the same time to temper that assertiveness with humility. And so I suppose that would be the message. Be assertive, but with humility.
That's what you're saying with in your wise age of 68.
Well, I've still got a lot to learn.
Hopefully. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
David. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.